Gazelle, do you think that there was possibly a class component to your reaction to Stephen J. James in that you have an elite accent and he has very much a working class accent?
Um, no, and there are many reasons for that. One is because received pronunciation in the UK, it's no longer just limited to the so-called elites. Many people talk like me. In fact, if you go to East Anglia, Cambridge, that sort of region in the UK, Nottingham, everyone, including the working class people, will have received pronunciation. So, and that is because the RP accent, it actually originates from that region.
Wow. So you don't have, you don't react to a cue of the British varieties of the British working class accent as like, here comes boredom.
No. So the boredom was because he genuinely is quite boring. Um, and I just don't think he makes any interesting points. I wouldn't really judge someone by their accent, not just because, oh, I'm not an elitist or something, or I'm a really good person. No, I just feel like I'm genuinely above that because um, for a long time, I taught myself how to think. You know, there was a time in my life where I was kind of religious as well, and I guess once I started looking more critically into religion, you learn, you know, the typical kind of logical fallacies and things like that, right? So you become a better thinker, and it's just impossible to just kind of judge someone purely on the basis of their accent. However, can I just say, I do judge Chris Kavanaugh a bit.
And tell me how so.
Because he just sounds so disgusting. He's like, ah, you sure hangy, like it's it actually hurts listening to him, and it's really ironic. So I guess I'm being contradictory here because on the one hand I'm saying I don't judge people by their accent, and I'm also like doing this whole kind of apologist defense of the RP accent. It's you know the working class chavs can have it too in Britain, and it's true. But I don't know why when it comes to Chris Kavanagh, Kavanagh, is it Kavanagh? How do you pronounce
I
his
think it's
surname?
Chris Kavanagh, I think.
Kavanagh. Sorry, I was thinking of the Attorney General under Trump.
The Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Attorney
yeah.
General, still used to British whatever's. So yeah, so Chris Kavanagh, yeah, it's just ironic that he talks like that. So he's decoding the gurus. He's the academic there. He's decoding people who are already quite smart. I mean, he doesn't decode people who are really dumb and low IQ. He's just decoding popular icons who are kind of considered quite smart by lots of different people, right?
Yeah.
So it's a difficult job actually, because it's easy to just criticize someone who's just so obviously wrong. But what Chris Kavanagh's doing is quite difficult, because he really does have to think where these people are going wrong, where their arguments are fallacious. So I, hats off to him. He's working really hard, and you're working even harder, I think. If we just go back to the accent thing for a second, then I can compliment you on how hard you're working on this decoding the decoders, right?
Yeah.
Um, um, so yeah, the accent is just it really grates on you. So do you know what? Once I listened to Chris Kavanagh's voice, I realized like I could understand why the mainstream mainland Brits used to hate these people. Like I
Yeah.
finally understood it because I grew up with this notion that the Irish are so endearing and their Irish accent is so endearing as well. It's really nice, right? And then I listened to him and I was like, what? Do people actually speak like this in Ireland, in the UK? Um, so that's that. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit mean, which is
I
why,
think you're being honest. I mean, I think we all
yeah,
react to cues because it's a decent enough heuristic to
yeah.
find
I
out
think
our
he's.
way through life.
I think Chris Kavanagh is a bit of a Tatian. I mean, I love to use that word because it means many different things to me. Like, well, it kind of means one thing, like it's a single worldview, right? But many people fall under the category of Tatism, or they have aspects of Andrew Tate in them. And I think talking in a brash way, I think that's kind of Tateian. It suits Andrew Tate. Like when Andrew Tate does it, I find that very attractive. But when Chris Kavanagh does it, and to be honest, that is quite attractive. But I just don't associate it with this kind of academic intellect. He should just he should have just been a rapper or something. Why is he LARPing as an academic?
Well, you're kind of a high low girl. I mean, you enjoy parts of lowbrow culture, parts of highbrow culture. I mean, you go up and
Yeah.
down the spectrum.
Well, it's because of my very middle class upbringing. I mean, I may sound more uppity than I am, but and I'm not just like doing this for to be sort of self-deprecating, like I'm so middle class when I'm actually like so fucking rich. No, um, I I am pretty middle class, so upbringing wise. So yeah, I can enjoy aspects of. To be honest, I much prefer low culture because it's just funnier. I don't really find upper class people too funny. I'll be honest. I
Have
think
you
because humor is looked down upon in those spaces.
have you seen Saltburn, the 2023 movie?
No, I have not.
Do you know anything about it?
No, I do not know.
It's about someone who's uncool at Oxford who gloms on to someone who's upper class and the very height of cool, and then slowly worms his way into the hip group.
That sounds really fascinating. I did you like the movie?
I did. I did. It wasn't
Hmm.
easy. It's kind of shocking, but but it's great. Like I love that kind of theme. Uh,
Who is in the movie?
I will give you the names in a second. So it's a thriller comedy, black comedy, psychological thriller, directed, written by Emerald Fennell, starring Barry Keoghan, Jacob Elordi, Rosamund Pike, Richard Grant, Alison Oliver, and Archie
Hmm.
Medekwe. Set in Oxford, it focuses on a student at Oxford who becomes fixated with a popular aristocratic fellow student who later invites him to spend the summer at his eccentric family's estate.
Well, I mean, I think that sort of explains my fixation with my ex, who I call Morrison. He
Mm,
was quite eccentric. But we can't talk about that
no, no,
right now,
let's not. But what about have
because
you? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. No, I just want to carry on the Chris Kavanagh thing for a
Yes.
second. I j- it is kind of off-putting when I listen to him speak. But then at the same time, he does crack a lot of jokes. What do you think? I've not actually listened to too much of his stuff, but I intend to do so, not directly, but via you. I want to listen to your entire series that you've done so far.
Oh wow, wow. So
Because
I
I
found
think
him.
I think I no, I think what you've managed to do is actually some of the greatest content is in the history of mankind, and I'm not even exaggerating. Because to analyze people who are already analyzing other people, and a lot of those people that they're analyzing also are sort of analysts. You know, Jordan Peterson, he's not an original thinker of some sort. He is dependent on Carl Jung, and he's derivative, right? Most people are
Yeah.
today. So, like, you are analyzing the analysis of the analysis of the analysis of the analysis.
Yes, that's what I'm
So
trying
you
to
are a
do.
supreme being.
That's what I'm trying to do. Like I'm trying to add value to intellectual discourse, and you add value primarily by making something clearer that was
Hmm.
previously not clear. So if there's anything I can do to provide the most effective
Mm,
analysis of the analysis of the analysis. That's what I strive to do, to
mm,
try to make
mm,
something more clear and move beyond the received wisdom.
mm. But also, you operate at a quite at a more at a different level to most people. And most people are thinking in binaries. So even Chris Kavanagh and who's his co-host? I forgot. Arthur Dent, is
Matthew
it?
Brown,
Oh,
who uses the name
Matthew
Arthur
Brown.
Dent on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So I thought they were two different people, which is why I got confused.
They are. Matt Brown is from Australia. He's the oh yeah no yeah
Oh,
so but he uses the Twitter persona Arthur Dent, but that is Matt Brown. Yeah.
okay, okay. So, yeah, regarding these two individuals, or I'll just sort of hyper focus on Chris Kavanagh because it's easier. I mean, he's approaching things from a very atheistic lens, even if he won't admit that he's a pure atheist, and even though he'll start like criticizing the new atheists for being a bit racist and dismissive of religion, blah blah blah. But he's not religious himself, whereas you can operate at a level of actually you can operate at a purer form of rationality because you recognize that uh, believing in God can be very rational, right? And uh, you also recognize that an atheist can have a very high level of rationality as well. So you're not bound by belief and disbelief like they are. Um, and they're not so obviously bound by this, but I sense it. And it definitely, when it comes to you analyzing their analysis, you can see the difference because you will stop in places and you will say, well, actually, in some ways, religion can be quite helpful. It is. It can have an evolutionary advantage. It can bring peace to someone's life and organization, and so you can kind of functionalize religion, whereas um, their analysis kind of stops at a certain point, and they are kind of nitpicking. I feel at right wing thinkers.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that. I mean, then one could argue, well, Luke Ford is also nitpicking at Chris Kavanagh, but that's not really what you're doing because there isn't that kind of ad hominem there.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with with Chris Kavanagh, there is a kind of agenda. There is an axe to grind. So and he can't kind of get rid of that reflexive disgust, ick that he feels towards a lot of the people that he's analyzing. And what you tend to do is you humanize the people that they are analyzing by saying that, well, it's what Jordan Peterson, for example, does is only human. Other people do this as well, right? So, and I think you go beyond humanizing as well, which is you can actually see where maybe Jordan Peterson has a serious point, which actually overrides Chris Kavanagh's criticism.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
I'm
trying to
really
do.
impressed.
Oh, thank you so, so much. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do because I guess my primary critique of Chris Kavanaugh and Matthew Brown is that they don't recognize the arbitrary partisan nature of their own particular hero system because it is the water in which they swim. So just like someone who lives their life within Orthodox Judaism and they take for granted that hero system, so too Matthew Brown, Chris Kavanaugh, and other members of the academy live within a particular hero system that valorizes a particular approach to life around harm reduction, around idea of a buffered identity so that we, in our own buffer, we can create morality and meaning for ourselves without regard to the
Mm,
community.
mm,
This very individualist perspective on life that we're all essentially primarily individuals with certain inalienable rights.
mm,
And I would strongly argue against that. I would say that we are best understood as being members of families, extended families, tribes, and communities and nations. and that we primarily get our direction and our hero system from our tribe, from our community, and it's usually not something that's thought through. And they've joined a particular community with a particular hero system, and they don't seem to give much thought to how the particular water in which they're swimming is taken for granted by them as the most heroic approach to life. They see it as objective and empirical, and I see it as another partisan hero system that is underlain by particular acts of faith to provide meaning to their life, just like a member of Orthodox Judaism has engaged in the same sort of partisan leap of faith to create meaning for their life.
Yeah, and in the same way that Chris Kavanagh and his co-hosts are pretty partisan as well. Perhaps not exactly in the same way. I think it's also kind of hypocritical, or sorry, I wouldn't call it hypocrisy, but or perhaps it is, but it's inconsistent that Chris Kavanagh is very much okay with like other hero systems in other he's okay with hero systems in other cultures. So like if he goes off to Japan, I think he's doing some research project in Japan, he treats all of the kind of Japanese irrationality with a lot of respect.
Yes.
And actually from a pure reason perspective, that irrationality might be even more irrational than Jordan Peterson, right? If you want to be completely, honest here. So that poses a major inconsistency in the there's a hole in his methodology there.
Right. I don't feel like they notice the water that they're swimming in. And so one way to get an insight into the host of Decoding the Gurus is that on a show just for Patreons, they mention for each of them their greatest fear. What do you imagine their greatest fear is professionally?
Sorry, if you just repeat that question to me, what their fear is professionally, did you give a context for that question?
What is their greatest fear with regard to their podcast? Like what are the direct possible consequences as a result of their podcast that they have the most visceral? No, their greatest fear is emails to their dean. So if they get emails to their dean complaining about something that they said on the show, that is the most likely to create turbulence in the most important professional area of their life.
But they know that no one will complain about them because they genuinely are ideologically aligned with the left. And even if they kind of push the boundaries of academic discourse, they're still within the confines of the right politics.
Yeah, so they've got the right politics. They share the hero system, and so they are largely immune from cancellation. Not just being cancelled, but they're immune from the turbulence that makes life so upsetting and difficult. If you fall out of alignment with the group that is the primary source of meaning and purpose and heroism in your life, that makes your life incredibly painful. But they are immune from that because they stay within the liberal left bubble.
But do you think that they genuinely are living in fear, and that's why they do things? Because I think it's become so second nature to them to be on the left that they're not really stuck in a fear-based system. Like you could ultimately call all forms of morality mob morality, where you're doing things for the group. However, if you kind of discard that for a second, I don't think what they're doing is just for the group. Like they genuinely believe in what they believe in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say that they have a normal functional amount of fear. That the fear should play a functional role in everyone's life, and that is whatever's most precious to you. You should have fear of anything that threatens that, and their professional standing, their professional stature, their professional life is the thing next to their family that I would suspect is the most precious thing in their life. And so You should rationally be concerned about anything
Well,
that would threaten it.
the most the most precious thing in their life seems to be that podcast. I think Chris Kavanagh will eventually start showing signs of the guru complex himself. I mean,
I
you've probably done that.
mm,
You did that decoding Chris Kavanagh episode, didn't you?
yeah, and I think I mentioned this emphasis that their greatest fear is falling out of alignment with their academic peers. I'm not sure that they will voluntarily leave academia. I think they get a great deal of sustenance from their life in academia.
Can I say this, that I think their greatest fear, in the more immediate sense, so not something that's subconscious, which is the fear of falling out of line, um, or I don't know if that's subconscious. It's hard to categorize it exactly, but I think what they really fear is being seen as hypocrites. They do fear that ultimately they might become what all the people they are analyzing right now became, because a lot of the people they analyze on their podcast, they didn't start off as gurus, right? So a lot of them started off as genuine academically minded individuals, and then as their fame kind of kept going up, they
Lost their
just
mind.
kind of went off the rail. Yeah, I
Yes.
wouldn't say lost their mind, but just kind of went off the rails
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
depending on who. Again, I've not watched all the episodes, so I can't really name the people that they're analyzing off the top of my head. I mean, you're doing Destiny today, who, I mean, they're not being fair to Destiny. Actually, what do you think?
Well, I think that they have been fair to Destiny because I listened to the whole thing. I mean, Destiny has to be understood in his particular genre. He's a live streamer, and people go to live streams for a spectacle and a discourse that they can't get in the mainstream media. And so, a live streamer should be judged by different standards than, say, an academic. So, I don't think that what you articulated is their greatest fear. I don't think it's even one of their top five because both
Well,
of
it's
them seem
because they'll lose the reason. They'll lose, yeah, they'll lose the exact reason for their podcast.
right, but they are firmly rooted in their academic disciplines. So people who are insecure have signs that give away their insecurity. And I don't see any signs of them feeling insecure about tipping into becoming gurus themselves.
Mm, right.
So if
Um,
my go ahead.
no, I can't actually remember what exactly I was going to say. No, you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so if my greatest fear was crossing the orthodoxy in Orthodox Jewish community, then that would be easy to spot. If my greatest fear was losing, say, my friendship with Nathan Koffness, people would pick that up. So people's greatest vulnerability and greatest fear usually becomes fairly apparent. And what's apparent to me with regard to decoding the gurus is their greatest fear is they very much want to stay within the good graces of their respective academic communities. And I don't see any signs of their greatest fear being the one that you articulated.
Okay. Well, I disagree with you.
Great. That's why it's good to have you on and get a different perspective.
I think they do fear then, and that fear pushes them to keep making content that's highly analytical. I mean, many academics have started off quite genuine and gone off the rails a bit. Like, I don't know, would you include Jonathan Haidt in that category?
A
Because
little
he's
bit.
not like a he's not like a Chris Kavanagh. He's more like a pop psychologist.
He's more like a public intellectual. So public intellectual is different from the guru in that the guru opines on all sorts of areas of life where they don't necessarily know much. A public
Mm,
intellectual will use his standing in a particular part of the academic arena. So a public intellectual will have genuine academic accomplishments, and then he will use that status to comment on things that are related to his area of status. And so that's what I see Jonathan Haidt doing. Now, I think Haidt has fallen into some of the
I
vulnerabilities
really
that
like
come. Yeah.
I really like how you use the term status, by the way, because I know it's used in evolutionary biology quite a bit, or evolutionary psychology, but I feel like Brits mostly talk about class, Marxists talk about power, but really what's at play is status, right? So
Yeah.
that is a much better term to use. Um, and I'm really glad that you use it with such ease and don't shy away from it. It is a very Tatian thing to do, by the way, because he talks about status a lot. I know the context is a bit crass because it's, high status males and low status males and, high body count, low body count. But, whenever Tate has shown moments of intellectual brilliance, he still conceptualizes things into this kind of status paradigm, and it's kind of just hidden away from us in Britain because people like hyperventilate when they talk about class, and that's the only word they use. But to call something low status, just to say like, oh, you lady with those drawn on eyebrows, it's a very low status thing to do. um, People just don't say these things when it's just the reality.
Yeah. And honestly, I've always looked to make a contribution, and status is perhaps the number one area of life
Mm,
that is the most important, that does not
mm,
get
mm.
honest attention. People would rather
Yeah.
disclose the number of STDs they have than the amount
Yeah.
of effort they go into
Yes.
to get higher status.
Indeed. Indeed. It's fascinating. I mean, the Quran has a line about status. I can't remember the exact chapter and the verse because I don't have the hard copy of the Quran in front of me right now either. But it is that indeed it is God who gives status. He is the status giver. And so you see that modern Muslims have kind of retranslated that as power,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work if you translate it like that because um or like I can't really tell you why it doesn't work. It's just kind of intuitive as to why I think you get it. I don't know if the listeners will understand, but we're just socialized against using this term, it seems.
It's
But
too
you're absolutely
shameful.
right.
People would rather
Yeah.
disclose how many people they've slept with. They'd rather disclose suffering from diarrhea than to
Yeah.
disclose their the amount of effort they've made into improving their status. I think aside
Mm,
from meeting one's survival needs, I think after that the single biggest driving force in people is to improve their social standing. In other words, to
mm,
reduce the chances of social humiliation and increase
mm,
the chances of being socially approved and looked up to. So, aside from
mm,
our raw basic survival needs, I see people as being primarily driven by the desire
mm,
to avoid social humiliation and to advance in social status.
mm. Well, can I give you another example of a reference to status? So I was listening to sorry a hidden reference to status rather, where the word was changed, right? So I was listening to Cindy Yu, who is a journalist for The Spectator, and she runs a podcast called the Chinese Whispers podcast. She sort of focuses on China for the Spectator magazine. And so she was in an interview with Coleman Hughes, and she's like, "Oh well, it's only people who have power in the discourse who should really speak, right?" And I thought, just say status.
Right.
What do you mean power in the discourse? Why does it have to be this kind of Marxist social science sort of term, right? In fact, it's not even really social science. It's more voodoo than anything. I mean, status is more reality based.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who does not yearn to minimize social humiliation? I mean, for whom is social humiliation not among the most painful experiences of their life? Like, who does not hate being fired? Who does not like being, exposed to the people who are most important to you as some kind of defect or loser? I think we all fear that. And we all know what it's like to be treated depending on our status level. We all know what it's like to be considered higher status than average, and we know the amount of superior treatment we get when we're perceived as higher status, and we know the crap that gets shoveled at us when we're perceived as low status.
Which is why I think people who get into fitness are kind of buffering the effects of sorry, I was going to say being being low status.
I mean, it's true. A lot of people become fixated
Yeah.
with fitness to try to overcome the humiliation. It's their way of dealing with the humiliation of being low status. I know that worked for
No, but
me.
I think it's a good technique. It's a very good it's a very good thing to do. I
Right,
know you do the Alexander technique.
which is the gayest thing ever. But
No, I really like it. I watched some of your videos where you're like just kind of helping people balance, and I really admire you, Luke. You're a
thank
really good person, and you do run an excellent live stream, and you're a very honest, critical thinker, without um, without actually appearing loserish while at it. Like you really do have a kind of aura about you.
oh, thank you. I think I know this is true for my life at times, that when we have a problem such as we feel low status, we 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 choose something that we think is the solution that is completely removed from anything that is likely to be the solution. So, for example, for people who are low status, and I felt that at times, and it has driven me into athletic exertion. So, at one point in my life, I ran 5 marathons. At other point in my life, I dedicated myself to sit-ups and push-ups to build out my
But that's
physique.
very good. But that's very good. Did you feel as if you'd regained some status, well, confidence really,
I
uh, as a
did,
result
but
of
there
that?
would have been much more effective ways to go. If I would have found some way of dealing with the fundamental issue, which was my own relationship to myself, rather than seeking to externalize this issue into push ups, sit ups, and long distance running, I would have been much more effective. So, sit ups and push ups, it made me feel a little better about myself, but it didn't get close to addressing the fundamental problem that was causing my misery. And that is my lack of ability to be a good friend to myself. I would instead rotate between an exaggerated sense of my own capability and importance and a complete sense of despair and self hatred. And so either approach to myself was not adaptive, and I would have been much
Mm,
better if I had put my efforts into learning to become a better friend to myself as opposed to just working out. Like, it's so much more tempting to do these external things like working out or learning a new language, or mixing with a new social class, or getting a new job, or moving to a new location, or going to a new church, or joining a new religion. Right, it's so tempting to do the geographic, to do this externalization, this appealing delusion that we have that will deal with our biggest source of pain, rather than dealing with the biggest source of pain by something that has a significant chance of working, which is usually
mm,
going down to your relationship to yourself, which then shows itself in your relationship to other people. But as long as you're
mm,
unable to be a friend to yourself, or these other external missions are not going to shift the quality of your life.
mm. Well, do you think your feeling of being lower status beyond the kind of personal relationship you have with yourself, do you think that is something to do with you coming from a very kind of elite background. I've actually forgotten what your exact background is, like socioeconomic status wise. Do you think it's harder for you because like the expectations are more like I'm from a pretty middle class background. My parents are both professionals. Um, my dad is a doctor actually, but in the UK, it's a kind of middle class profession. It's not got the same kind of status as in the US, right? Um, and so there's just I don't feel this incredible pressure to be, some whatever top XYZ person in life. Like, I mean, I shouldn't be going the opposite way either. But the pressure is when if you're from a middle class family, it's not too um, difficult pressure wise because the expectations aren't like, wow, you should be making 1 million by the age of 30. Are you there? Hello?
Our delusions, and it reduces us to who we really are. And so I think the dominant thing that has led to my pain over low status has not been the disproportionate success of my father in one area of life. It's been what I'll just call ADHD, giving me all sorts of impulses that lead to a pattern of behavior that most people would call general weirdness. So when you're weird, you're off-putting to other people. You are causing other people discomfort, and so they naturally distance themselves from you. And so because I was bombarded by an ADHD physiology, it would express itself, despite the best of my efforts, as a general weirdness that people would distance themselves from, which left me ineffective, lonely, and low status. And I think this is true because once I got on ADHD medication, I noticed that 90% of these maladaptive impulses just melted away. But there are many people in my life who would echo your critique. They'd say the main thing that's driven me is a desire to struggle with my father's legacy and level of success. Whoops, I lost Curious Gazelle. Did you hear anything that I
Do you
was
know
saying?
what? So I don't know what happened. I think my connection was a bit crappy there, but yeah. So I heard the last bit. So it's that you your friends and family think that you struggled to sort of meet the expectations of your dad's legacy. But the fact that you make it also psychological and personalize it so much as in you think it's to do with your own ego, your own self. Do you think that is a sort of admirable evasion in the same way that people are more willing to admit that they've got STDs than just saying, well, actually, I don't have a job, mate, and I'm pretty low status.
Well, I think what's most important is what's true. And so what's true may be what you said. That may be the primary challenge that has deformed me, but
Mm,
that's not how I experience life. When I experience life, being on my ADHD medication seems to make all the dissonant forces in my physiology mute themselves, so it becomes very little effortful to stay harmonious with the people around me.
mm, mm. And also, there can be many levels of truth, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the psychological level is one level, then of course is one level of truth, and then of course the socioeconomic status thing, your dad's legacy, etc., your sort of family history, biography, that is another level of truth. So they're not necessarily at odds with one another. However, I do think that you're.
Yes, you still there? Oh, you got muted. So
Sorry, I
there.
couldn't. I couldn't see your. I couldn't see your profile, so that I thought you'd sort of close the space or something.
No, no, no. I just
Um.
shifted.
Oh, okay. Yes, but I do. I do. Do you want to carry on talking for a bit more, or are you tired? You must have. This has gone on for
No,
4 hours, I
I'm
think.
really enjoying it. I mean, I've got a friend coming over in 10, 20 minutes, but until then, I'd like to continue. I think we could agree that for some people, the main challenge to them having an effective
Mm,
life is physiological. For other people, it's
mm.
psychological. For other people, it's spiritual. For some people, it's
No, this
religious.
is all cope. This is all
What do you
cope.
mean?
You'd literally you'd do it. You'd. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to go back on what I said. Like the whole. Oh, there are different levels of truth. That there is the physiological. There is the psychological. There is the family biography one. I just think it's just cope. You're kind of doing what you're accusing others of doing. You know, you on a smaller level, you are doing what the people who go on about STDs do.
Wait, I think it's obvious that some people primarily that their biggest struggle in life is physiological. For other people, their biggest struggle in life is economic. For other people, their
Mm.
biggest struggle in life is psychological. For other people, their
Well, I
biggest
would I would say it all. Unless it's like a serious illness, right, which you can't control. I think all of these things are under the banner of status, which people just don't want to talk about.
right, but to be effective in
Third world
fighting.
cultures do, though. Third world culture. I'm sorry, I cut you off there.
No, go
You
ahead.
said to be effective. So I was going to say third world cultures are very open about this term status. I mean, even in India, you've got a caste system, but that caste system has been mistranslated as caste, right? But by the British. So the correct translation would be a status system. I mean, it is okay. I guess I'm stretching it a bit because it is a caste system in that, these are very kind of rigid groups to which people belong and they can't necessarily come out of. But before the Brits came in, and I'm not just doing this to like moan about an empire or something. I think empire is quite amazing in many ways, but I'm just saying this in a matter of fact way that before the Brits came in, before the caste system was properly kind of codified, you could. The caste system was very fluid actually, and it wasn't really a caste system. It was a kind of status system, and that and I think empire brought with it different castes with it itself, right? So the various kind of classes in India today, they have roots in the caste system, so to speak, but also like the colonial class system. So it's a bit of a mix, and ultimately, it's all just status games, right? Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that's what I'd say.
think that the pursuit of status is the strongest drive after survival. So I agree with you. I
Mm,
also agree that in different circumstances, different things will lead to status. So if
hmm
you're a villager in rural East Africa, right, what will lead to status is very different from what will lead to status if you get a scholarship and go to Oxford University.
mm, mm, yeah.
What do you think about
But then
my
it's also relative to the area to which you belong as well, right? So if you do graduate from Oxbridge in the UK, it's really not that elite anymore. It's not like a, oh my God, really sort of thing. It doesn't carry the same weight as having a sort of Ivy League education in the US. Um, so these two examples that you've given with the guy in the village and the Oxford graduate, I feel um, they're both relative to whichever society they sort of fit into.
Yeah, it all depends on which community is most important to you. Which people do you most want to give you status? So let's say that I was primarily concerned with the opinions of philosophers, and that I
Hmm.
put 10 times more importance on the opinion of philosophers because a lot of my friends are professional philosophers. And let's just say I
Mm,
put 10 times more importance on the opinions of philosophers compared to every other person or group in my life. Then I would speak philosopher code words, code language. I would orient my arguments to make them philosophically inviting and precise. And that's what would predominantly shape what I say publicly. On the other hand, if the group that I most want status from is Orthodox Jews, then I would primarily use that code language and embody that value system and speak in
mm,
a way that aligns with Torah. If I primarily wanted status just from professionals, then I would try to use the code words and the value system that dominates among dentists, accountants, doctors, and lawyers. So
mm,
we all want status, but we often want status from completely different groups. And so I'm part of many different groups. I'm part of the Orthodox Jewish community. I'm part of a live streaming group. I'm part of a right wing community. I'm part of a philosopher community. So
hmm.
I want status from all these different groups. And so my yearning for status will affect how I speak.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there. And you could also look at this sort of cult of POC politics, so persons of color or people of color. You could look at this style of politics from the lens of status as well. So a lot of these people, they may come off as very brash to the Westerners, but and they might come off as a very kind of leftist and Marxist, and they might come off as anti-status, right? Because they're not placating um, norms within you know traditional sort of Western politics, right? That they
Yep.
should be placating, they should be
Yep.
living up
Yep.
to, so that they can get status, right? But so the reason they behave like this is because their status is dependent on their ethnic sort of communities.
Yeah, I gotta
So
run. My friend just pulled up, so I enjoy talking to
okay,
you, but I
excellent.
don't want to
Okay,
keep
I really
him
like him. Yeah,
waiting.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay, lovely speaking to you, Luke. And
good
okay,
to talk to you.
bye.
Take care. Bye bye.